So you see this as a sort of last line of defense?
It is the last best chance we have to keep the active shooter from slaughtering our children.
Right now, it's time to change.
We're in a neighborhood in Parkland, Florida, and we're meeting up with a few of the students from MSD. Tomorrow will be their first time back at school since the shooting. Is Carmen in there?
Carmen?
Yeah, I think she is.
Yeah,
Her picture is. I don't know about her.
Didn't she write
right
in
here.
it? Or?
Wow, she looked so
There's
different.
Carmen.
So this shooter is actually in the book. He's on this page right here.
Yeah,
And when I looked through it this morning, I totally forgot that he was in it. And like, I remembered, like he went to school with us and he was there.
You kind of forget that like you actually kind of knew him. Like he was a student. He was one of us, but yet not.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that day?
My newspaper class, about 19, 20 of us, were all huddled in the corner of the classroom. We shut the lights off. We locked the door. I texted my mom. I texted my brother saying, I'm in a code red. I hear there's an active shooter on campus or there are gunshots coming from Escalades. But I said, I'm safe right now, I'm okay. I think it's a drill, but I'm not really sure.
I wouldn't know what code red meant. I know that sounds stupid, but did you guys know what that meant?
I mean, we've been versed in the...
So you've been taught about that in school?
Yeah. We literally just had formal training in January when we got back from winter break. Like, we're really fortunate. We knew what to do when it happened because I think the outcome could have been so much worse.
For me to hear about armed guards at every school is not something that I was really raised around, but you guys were born after Columbine.
We've grown up with code yellow, code red, code black our whole life.
Tomorrow is your first day back since the shooting. How are you feeling?
I think we're all a little actually excited to see each other again. It will be a little impacting also seeing the empty seats for the first time. I think it'll kind of bring the emotions of that day back, but when we're there together, it feels like we have the comfort and the support that we need, and we're going against it together.
Sophie, who's a junior at MSD, let us join her on her way to school the next morning. When you walk up there today, what are you expecting to see?
Just a lot of friendly faces. I know all of our teachers are gonna, be offering us hugs, talking to us, and there are also gonna be a lot of guidance counselors, a lot of people just to talk to if you don't have anybody else to talk to, and then also there are gonna be a lot of armed guards.
What are the next steps for you guys, the MSD students?
Definitely just to make sure that something like this doesn't die out, because Sandy Hook, Las Vegas, those things kind of fizzled out after a week or so. People were tired of seeing it on the news, and we're just here to make sure that people won't forget that this happened.
You're seeing all the kids just kind of file in. There are tons of officers from the police and sheriff departments and a lot of members of the community who are supporting the kids as they go through. What's really strange about being here is that this scene is familiar. We've seen this unfold so many times. And I think what these kids hope is that this scene will no longer unfold in different cities across America, that they can be the generation that actually changes gun policy. Parkland was just the latest in a series of devastating mass shootings that have terrorized American communities and killed nearly 500 people in the last decade alone. While the calls for gun control rang loudly after the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, which took the lives of 20 children and 6 adults, Congress was paralyzed by partisan gridlock. Meanwhile, the National Rifle Association was establishing a new narrative, not only dismissing gun control, but calling to arm more people.
The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
5 years later, some of the Parkland shooting survivors are fighting back themselves, challenging the powerful gun lobby.
They say a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun. We call BS!
Like many Republican politicians, President Trump is following the NRA's lead and promoting their push to arm a very specific set of good guys, school teachers and staff.
But we have to take steps to harden our schools. so that they're less vulnerable to attack. This includes allowing well-trained and certified school personnel to carry concealed firearm. At some point, you need volume.
2 weeks after the Parkland shooting, despite an impassioned plea from students, Florida legislators passed part of what would become a $400 million bill promoting the arming of school employees. We met with Sophie and a few of her friends after their first day back to hear their reactions.
Just a few minutes ago, Florida lawmakers passed a bill for a school marshal program, which would mean training teachers on how to carry guns. How do you guys feel about that?
Kind of just hurts knowing that they're funding money into this bill that'll also put teachers in an uncomfortable situation if another school shooting happens, where then the SWAT team comes in, they ask if anyone's injured, and then who has a gun, and nobody wants to be the person that says, I have a gun.
What's to say that the teacher might miss, and then who else would get injured? I don't know if it would make me feel safer to know that each of those teachers would have a gun somewhere in their classroom. In a way, I'd almost feel more uncomfortable.
What do you think about what the NRA and Trump and others have said, the idea that a good guy with a gun can stop a bad guy with a gun?
I mean, I understand that in the point that if we had more police officers or school resource officers who knew what to do in that situation, but at the same time, they're specially trained to do that. Our teachers are trained to teach, so they shouldn't, have to learn how to carry a gun as well.
With the Trump administration's support, schools across the country are considering arming their teachers. But just a few hours from Parkland, Sheriff Grady Judd has been doing it for years and thinks his program should be the blueprint for the rest of the country.
So you originally had the idea to start the School Sentinel program.
We did.
And why did you come up with that idea?
We study every one of the active shooters, the horrible events that have occurred since Columbine. One of the common denominators is the active shooter, on average, arrives, does his evil deed, and leaves between 2 minutes and 5 minutes. The police response is a plus 5 minutes. If the active shooter, he's walking down the hallway toward your child's classroom, do you want someone there now to stop him before he goes in and slaughters your child?
So you see this as a sort of last line of defense?
It is the last best chance we have to keep the active shooter from slaughtering our children.
Sheriff Judd invited us to see his school sentinels in action, a group of local college professors and staff who have gone through 132 hours of training to be armed and ready to respond to a mass shooter at their school.
So this is the School Sentinel program, training teachers how to end a mass shooting. Men and women of all ages, all backgrounds. The one thing they have in common is that they all really look like teachers, except for the fact that they're carrying massive guns.
Shots fired. What are we doing?
We're gonna go.
What are we doing? No, don't sweep him. You gotta be right behind him.
Shots fired! Shots fired! Get down! Hey, get down! Get down! Get down!
He's got his gun.
You got
If a guy's got a gun, shoot them.
In addition to firearms training, maybe the most important element of these drills is to learn to hit the right target.
The gunman's just a few feet from me right here, and we're waiting on the teachers to come in.
You okay? You're good.
How did you originally decide to sign up for this?
I mean, there's so many school shootings that are happening, and when you're an administrator on a campus like that, for us, our heart sank, and we're like, what are we going to do? We have to do something. And so it was really a no-brainer, kind of an obvious yes for us.
Obviously, part of the idea of this program is to remain anonymous, remain discreet. So why the AR-15s?
I don't want to reveal tactics about where they are, but the sheriff's office has done an incredible job to make sure that we have the equipment that we're going to need to respond as law enforcement agents.
Do you feel confident that you and your colleagues could end a mass shooting?
Yes.
Do you have kids?
I do.
And do you hope that faculty and teachers at their school are trained and armed?
Yes.
It is a game changer when you have a good guy with a gun, because that's the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun.
While Sheriff Judd's school sentinels haven't had to respond to an active shooter, one woman in Colorado has. Former police officer Gianna Toboni was volunteering as a church security guard when she stopped a shooter in his tracks.
He opened fire in the parking lot first, hitting 5 people, killing 2. He got about 80 feet inside, and that is when he was first confronted by Gianna Toboni.
I just knew I was not going to wait for him to do any further damage. I just knew what I had to do.
Jean showed us the handgun she used to take down the shooter.
So this is the Beretta that I use. It's a police Beretta, so it carries 16 rounds.
So we're surrounded by AR-15s, the gun that the mass shooter used and fired at you. This doesn't seem like a match.
Well, I've heard people say, there's no way you can take on an AR-15 with a handgun, and I'm living proof that yes, you can. You just have to have the right mindset.
You know, obviously a big argument right now is that teachers should be armed. Do you buy that argument? Do you support that?
No, absolutely not. You're like, why?
Why not?
I just feel that if you're a prior law enforcement and now you're a teacher, go for it. But if you haven't had law enforcement training, you are not used to that law enforcement mindset, that always alert, always ready mindset.
What if there's thorough training? What if there's target training, scenario training?
It's not going to cut it. You cannot expect them to drop the chalk and pick up a gun and become instant cop. It's awful seeing somebody get shot and killed. It's gory. It's messy. You never forget it.
Jean showed us the difference between the gun she used to stop the shooter in Colorado and the AR-15 used in Parkland, Sandy Hook, and against her.
Okay, so we got the AR-15, and then...
Did he get you a Beretta?
So Beretta 92 FS.
That's what I have. I want you to feel that versus that.
Why don't you walk me through step by step?
Load it, put the magazine in hard.
Okay.
And then drop the slide. There you go. So you're in single action. You're ready to rock and roll. Not bad. Lay the gun down once. Let me show you something.
Okay.
Hand over hand.
I see where you are. Okay.
Just like that.
Damn, girl.
We say center mass, shoot for center mass, because that's where all the organs are. That's a bigger target. You shoot to kill, you do not shoot to wound, or you will die. Why don't you try the...
Should I try this one? Yeah.
Just make sure you have to be confident, like, I have to save people here, you know? Or this is the gunman, you know? You're gonna hold the gun choice of a killer. So, you know, see what you feel. How do you feel about that?
This thing is heavy. Jesus. Okay, here it goes.
You see how loud that is compared to the Beretta?
Yeah. Wow. Way more powerful.
It's exactly what it sounded like at the church.
Have you heard an AR since then?
Not inside. Wow. Wow.
You okay?
Yeah.
While Jean thinks only trained law enforcement should protect our nation's schools, the NRA is now doubling down on the call to turn educators into, quote, good guys with guns.
Like Wayne LaPierre said, a good guy with a gun is the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun.
The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun
is a good guy with a gun.
The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun
is a good guy with a gun.
Sometimes the only thing that will stop a bad guy with a gun
is a good guy with a gun. Only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun
is a good guy with a gun.
And that's the hard reality of it.
To help spread this message, they've created their own network, NRA TV, and Grant Stinchfield is one of its biggest stars.
Hey, how are you, Gianna?
Welcome to my home. Nothing to be scared of.
Okay.
Us NRA guys are actually pretty nice.
Yeah. Nice art.
Oh, you like that? So that is my AK-47 pistol grip.
Do you have any real ones?
I don't have a real AK. I got a real AR-15. This is my gun safe, my pride and joy. This is my Glock, so it's clear.
Do you keep them empty?
I keep them empty. I keep a loaded firearm on my hip, which I have right now,
Okay.
and my AR in there. That's what everybody vilifies. And literally, there's nothing to vilify about that gun. That gun is a fabulous firearm. It is easy to use, terrific home defense gun. And no matter what they tell you, you can use it for hunting. And in fact, in Texas, hogs are a horrible nuisance. That is the gun of choice to hunt hogs.
How did you originally decide to get an AR?
Truth is, I bought the AR only because Obama was in office and I was worried, are they gonna really try to go and outlaw these? I better get myself one.
Did you really think that they were gonna either outlaw ARs or take your guns, as we hear?
There was a chance.
The Democrats, being run by liberal gun haters, will continue their assault on the Second Amendment. They will focus on state houses across the country, quietly slipping in more gun control through liberal-controlled legislative bodies.
What went through your mind when you saw the news of Parkland?
My son, instantly. My son was in school at the time when it happened. And at that moment, I thought of my kid, which is why it's offensive to me when I see signs like the NRA has blood on our hands and that I'm a child killer. And I've dedicated most of my adult life to people being able to keep themselves safe. Wayne LaPierre coined the phrase, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And nobody has been able to show me where that is a false statement.
But has anyone been able to prove that it's a true statement?
We just saw in Maryland that school resource officer came and literally engaged the shooter.
Police accuracy rate is 18% when they're being shot at. When they're not being shot at, it's 30%.
Okay.
That's not very good when you have a sea of kids in front of you and you're a teacher.
Guess what? It's a chance. And guess what? Even if the teacher, and everybody gets mad and it sounds horrible, even if the teacher misses the gunman and God forbid, hits a student, hits two students, is that not better than that gunman taking out the entire class? If it is a war, sometimes you have casualties in war, and that sounds harsh to say, but I want the casualties to be the lowest number possible.
Many would say that if it weren't for the NRA, AR-15s would be outlawed, the firearm that many mass shooters have used, including the one at Parkland, and bought legally.
If people give credit to the NRA for still being able to buy AR-15s, then God bless the NRA, because the AR-15 is a phenomenal firearm, and there's nothing more dangerous about that firearm than there is a common deer rifle.
But you know, as well as anyone, that the AR-15 can do a lot more damage in a shorter amount of time.
I would argue that you have some handguns that are more powerful than an AR-15.
What about the magazine and how many you can fire back to back?
Do you know how quick I can change the magazine out of my Glock?
Yeah, but we're talking about 20-year-old mentally ill kids.
Okay, great.
So when you give them something easy to shoot that they can rapid fire, bullets that are exploding in people's bodies, it's more harmful than a handgun.
Well, then thank God if a teacher has a firearm, because they're gonna be a better shot than that kid, and they're gonna take that kid out much quicker.
How do you think we end this series of mass shootings?
The sad reality is, I don't think you're ever gonna end it. People have been killing since the beginning of time, and it is sad.
But not like this. This is a new phenomenon over the last 20 years. People going into movie theaters, schools, malls, and shooting them up. It's a new thing.
I don't know if it's a new thing or not. I wasn't around, 60 years ago. I don't know.
But you were 25 years ago.
I was 25 years ago, but we have a whole different world when it comes to media and dissemination of information. I don't know whether it was going on or not. Maybe it's up, maybe it's down. You asked me, how do you stop it? I'm telling you, I don't think you stop it. The best way to stop it is to be prepared if it happens and stop it the moment it happens. And prevention.
Actually, can I interrupt you guys?
Please.
In the time we've been sitting here, there's an active shooter situation at the USU headquarters.
Wow.
California.
Wow.
Good afternoon. We are following a tense situation unfolding right now in San Bruno, California.
Sadly, law enforcement has converged on the YouTube campus because of reports of shots fired.
How do I want to say this? Because I don't know the details. Let's say San Bruno, so that is California.
No matter how you phrase it, because my answer is going to be
the same. Okay, so I'll just say it like this. Since we've been sitting here, shooter has entered YouTube offices. We don't know how bad the situation is. Why are these mass shootings happening with such frequency?
So, whatever happened, if that happened, that's horrible, but I'm not gonna do what the mainstream media does and start spouting off about something I literally know nothing about. I don't know what happened. I know no details of it, so literally there's nothing I can talk to you about on it.
That aside though, separate from YouTube, why are these happening more frequently?
Again, we went over this, and I told you, I don't know that they are happening more frequently. You tell me they're happening more frequently. I don't know that for sure. I do know that you cannot regulate evil.
We followed Grant as he left our interview to do live hits on NRA TV, restating the NRA's go-to narrative.
Right, given the breaking news, I'd like to bring in my friend Grant. Now I've been talking about him enough. Grant, how you doing?
You know, Dan, one of the things that I've learned about this, and when anything like this happens, is the bottom line is you cannot regulate evil. Evil will come calling. These people will find ways to kill.
The good guy with a gun matters, whether it's the bad guy killing themselves or stopping what they're doing now, Grant.
Dan, a good guy with a gun nearby gives people a chance of survival.
It seems that after each mass shooting, the public conversation often leaps into taking political sides. So we wanted to talk to somebody who's seen a completely different side of this crisis. Just 6 months ago, pediatric trauma surgeon Dr. Lillian Liao treated young children wounded in the Sutherland Springs Church massacre.
We begin tonight with that breaking news, a mass shooting at an American church.
There are 26 deceased, 23 in the church, 2 outside the church, and 1 at the hospital.
Bring us back to that day in November. What are some of the first things that you remember about that day?
We actually all happened to be in the building for a meeting when we received the initial contact that there had been a mass casualty incident in Sutherland Springs.
As the patients started to arrive, what do you remember seeing?
So we actually started receiving children first. And I had a child, he was internally bleeding.
Where was he shot and with what type of firearm?
Well, the reported firearm used was an AR-15. He was shot in the pelvis. He was shot in his left leg and left arm.
I think one of the things that people don't really realize is this isn't a bullet hole. Part of his leg is blown off.
Yes, it's a cavity. We call it gaping holes.
Dr. Liao agreed to show us exactly what bullets fired from these guns can do to bodies. The following images are disturbing.
Oh my God.
That's the one.
Oh my God, these are huge.
This is 2 weeks out.
That's 2 weeks out.
We don't take pictures in real time because we're trying to save their life. So
that was the front.
That was the front, and this is the sort of the back side.
Wait a second, so the wound goes all the way through the leg?
Yeah. The higher the velocity, the bigger the defect of not just what most people think of as a bullet hole. The force that hits the body is so fast that there's a blast range. I mean, if anybody's been hunting and knows what it looks like after you've successfully hunted an animal, that's exactly what it looks like. When you get shot with a handgun, most likely it's not gonna look like this. There may be some skin and tissue missing, but it's usually what you think of as a little circular hole.
It's hard to deny the power between these two firearms.
A handgun injury and the wounds that it creates is completely different than something that is created by either an AR or a shotgun or a rifle. People may not understand that and feel like firearm is firearm, but they're not really the same.
You're one of, the only doctors in the US that has been in that type of environment. Unfortunately, the number of those doctors is growing. What would you share with the general public as someone who's been in that situation?
We have a public health crisis. We have an increase in the number of firearm-related injuries by as much as 20% since 1999. And we as a community, not just speaking as a physician or a surgeon, but speaking as a person living in this country, we shouldn't have two divisive teams of people. We should have one group of people working together to try to bridge the difference. I think we need to do something.
Instead, it seems our nation is locking itself into the same predictable partisan battle as always. But this time, the survivors of the Parkland school shooting have thrown themselves into the middle of it. The MSD student movement is now publicly feuding with both the NRA and its conservative allies.
Yeah, there has been some unfortunate media handling of these traumatized children. They've used them as ways to enact what they always like to do, which is a gun control agenda.
The student walkout for gun control yesterday looked at times more like a political celebration. It was scripted and screamed.
The only reason that we've gotten so far is because we are not afraid of losing money. We are not afraid of getting reelected or not getting reelected. We have nothing to lose. The only thing we have to gain at this point is our safety.
I asked the Parkland students if they felt like they were pawns in some political debate, that they were being exploited by political operatives. And they basically said, we don't care. We're not endorsing their campaigns. We'll take the support. It helps us get our message out.
It's a great answer by those kids. It's a great answer. Usually pawns don't know they're being used as pawns. You know, I play a lot of poker. If you don't know who the sucker is at the table, you're probably the sucker.
The Never Again kids turned to social media and, with the help of the powerful gun control advocacy groups, organized one of the largest single-day protests the country has ever seen, the March for Our Lives.
Today, we take to the streets in over 800 marches around the globe and demand common sense gun laws.
What do you say to those critics, including some of the Douglas students, who say they don't want their teachers to be armed?
Yeah, they're children, and they have a perspective from a child. This is the white light of change.
6 minutes and 20 seconds with an AR-15, and my friend Carmen would never complain to me about piano practice. Aaron Feist would never call Kira Miss Sunshine. Jamie Guttenberg would never Meadow Pollock. Would never.
The students of the Never Again movement believe they can force Congress to break the cycle of political inaction. After all, many of them will be able to vote come November.
Are you confident that you guys can create change?
Yes.
We're the next generation, we're the next wave of voters.
And I know we won't stop until we get what we want.
Today is the beginning of a bright new future for this country. And if you think today is good, just wait for tomorrow.